The country is not strong without finance and strong GDP. In today's video, we are going to discuss the top 10 richest countries in Asia as of 2020. So, stay tuned to number 1, so you should be able to know more about it. Number 10. UAE. Starting the list with UAE. The economy will contract this year as the pandemic and low oil prices weigh on activity. Next year, GDP is expected to recover on the back of stronger aggregate demand as economies reopen globally. UAE has a GDP of $405.771 billion as of 2019. Nevertheless, downside risks remain. Uncertainty over the pandemic lingers, and further spikes in infections could dampen oil demand ahead. Focus Economics analysts forecast GDP to increase by 3.0% in 2021, which is unchanged from last month's forecast, and 3.6% in 2022. The economy seemingly started to recover in the third quarter after the second quarter's sharp contraction. Moreover, oil production hit a near-decade low amid constrained output and low global prices, likely weighing on government finances. Additionally, the sharp increase in new COVID-19 cases through September-October poses a threat to the recovery, as limits could be tightened again. In other news, on 20 October the UAE and Israel struck a preliminary deal for the oil exporter to send oil straight to Europe via an Israeli pipeline, boding well for the UAE's oil exports. Number 9. Iran. Who doesn't know Iran? Iran's gross domestic product (GDP) is estimated at $458,500 billion as of 2019. For a population of about 82.8 million. Iran's economy is characterized by its hydrocarbon, agricultural, and service sectors, as well as a noticeable state presence in the manufacturing and financial services. Iran ranks second in the world for natural gas reserves and fourth in proven crude oil reserves. While its economic base is relatively diversified for an oil-exporting country, economic activity and government revenues still rely on oil revenues and have, therefore, been volatile. On the economic front, the growth plan forecasts annual economic growth of 8%. Among the main priorities of the government during the 5-year period are the reform of state-owned enterprises, financial and banking sectors, and the allocation and management of oil revenues. Number 8. Thailand. On number 8, there is Thailand. Over the last 4 decades, Thailand has made remarkable progress in social and economic development, moving from a low-income to an upper-income country in less than a generation. Thailand has a GDP rate of $509,200 billion as of 2020. As such, Thailand has been a widely cited development success story with sustained strong growth and impressive poverty reduction. While Thailand has been successful in stemming the tide of COVID-19 coronavirus infections over the last few months, the economic impact has been severe and has led already to widespread job losses, affecting middle-class households and the poor alike, and threatening hard-won gains in poverty reduction. Economic growth in Thailand is expected to contract in the year 2020, which is among the sharpest projected drops in the East Asia and Pacific region, due to a decline in external demand affecting trade and tourism, supply chain disruptions, and weakening domestic consumption. The outbreak will likely lead to severe job losses, particularly in tourism, due to transmission control and social distancing measures. Number 7. Turkey. Available data continues to point to an economic recovery in the third quarter. According to sources, Turkey has an estimated GDP of $649 billion, which make it stands at number 7. Industrial output rebounded strongly in July-August on an annual basis from the steep fall, amid surging manufacturing production, which rose at the sharpest rate in over 2 years in August. Moreover, business confidence swung to optimistic territory in the quarter as the general business climate improved and export expectations turned rosy. However, household spending likely remained relatively subdued, despite consumer credit growth picking up notable steam in the quarter, as consumer self-confidence did not improve and inflation remained elevated. In the political arena, Finance Minister Barre Al-Barak presented the new economic program for 2021-2023. The program, which envisages 5.8% GDP growth next year, focuses on strengthening innovation, value-added production, and exports to drive growth. Number 6. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has an estimated $779 billion as of 2019. The contraction likely eased slightly record GDP contraction due to flagging oil production and domestic lockdown measures. The year-on-year fall in oil production eased in Q3 as output rose in September for the first time since April. In addition, the non-oil private sector PMI averaged higher in Q3 and pointed to a stabilization in output, supported by easing lockdown restrictions despite July's VAT hike. Turning to Q4, however, a global surge in COVID-19 cases weighed on oil prices in October. Meanwhile, the government unveiled projections for next year's budget in late September. The preliminary estimates show an approximate 7.3% spending cut and a 9.8% increase in revenues. The country plans to shift spending towards the sectors hit hardest by the pandemic to support the recovery, while prioritizing fiscal discipline next year. The economy should rebound robustly on the back of stronger oil production and as domestic demand recovers from this year's lockdown measures, which have hampered investment and household spending. Number 5. Indonesia. Indonesia has an estimated GDP of $1.09 trillion as of 2020. The economy contracted sharply according to recent research data, although at a softer rate. Private consumption and fixed investment were both down, notably amid lingering domestic social mobility restrictions. However, public spending surged as the government was finally able to expedite stimulus measures. Moreover, the external sector contributed markedly to GDP, albeit largely due to import compression, as exports continued to fall markedly. Turning to the fourth quarter, early signs are muted amid ongoing restrictions in Jakarta and stubbornly high infection rates. In October, the manufacturing PMI continued to signal deteriorating operating conditions, while consumer sentiment worsened and retail sales contracted at a sharper rate, according to preliminary estimates. The economy is set to rebound next year, maintained by fiscal and monetary stimulus and the likely lessening impact of COVID-19. Moreover, the passage of the omnibus bill could buoy investment to an extent. However, uncertainty over the evolution and period of the pandemic and the timing of a vaccine clouds the outlook. Focus Economics consensus forecast panelists expect GDP to expand by 5.0% in 2021, which is unchanged from last month's forecast. In 2022, GDP is seen growing by 5.1%. Number 4. South Korea. On number 4, there is South Korea. South Korea stands at number 4 due to its GDP of $1.6 trillion as of 2020. Even though South Korea wasn't hit as hard as most other countries, it quickly launched a fairly aggressive fiscal response, pouring around $12.2 billion, or about 0.7% of the country's GDP, into the pockets of businesses and citizens in early spring. That wasn't as big as countries such as Germany, which is launching a stimulus package worth around 4% of GDP, but because Seoul provided support quickly, it helped keep consumption up. South Korea is also continuing to provide support in the form of loans and guarantees totaling about $230 billion. Number 3. India. At number 3 we have India with a GDP rate of $2.6 trillion as of 2020. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) slashed the growth forecast for India for the second time this year, saying that the country's economy will contract 10.3% in FY21, the third steepest decline after Spain and Italy, and the sharpest fall among emerging markets and developing countries. This is the second downgrade for India by IMF after it reversed its forecast of 1.9% growth in April to a 4.5% contraction in June for 2020 to 2021. Number 2. Japan. On number 2, there is Japan. Japan's economic freedom score is 73.3, making its economy the 30th freest in the 2020 index. Japan has a GDP rate of $4.9 trillion as of 2020. Its overall score has increased by 1.2 points, due primarily to an improvement in fiscal health. Japan is ranked 8th among 42 countries in the Asia-Pacific region, and its overall score is well above the regional and world averages. The Japanese economy typically hovers in the lower ranks of the mostly free category. GDP growth has been constrained for many years as well. The chief culprit holding back greater economic freedom in Japan has been too much government spending. To address fiscal issues, the government is focused on reducing the cost of pensions in an aging society by introducing social security reforms to raise the labor force participation rate and extend the retirement age to 70. More fundamental structural reforms will be required to eliminate cronyism and boost entrepreneurship. Number 1. China. On top of our today's list, there is China, the emerging superpower and true Asian tiger in the region. China has an estimated GDP of $15.2 trillion as of 2020, according to Wikipedia. China's economy continues its recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, according to its latest official figures. The world's second biggest economy saw a growth of 4.9% between July and September, compared to the same quarter last year. However, the figure is lower than the 5.2% expected by economists. China is now leading the charge for global recovery, based on its latest gross domestic product (GDP) data. The near 5% growth is a far cry from the slump the Chinese economy suffered at the start of 2020, when the pandemic first emerged. For the first 3 months of this year, China's economy shrank by 6.8% when it saw nationwide shutdowns of factories and manufacturing plants. It was the first time China's economy limited since it started recording quarterly figures back in the year 1992. So, this was all about the top 10 richest countries in Asia as of 2020. I hope you liked today's video. If you want to hear more, click the bell icon and subscribe to our channel. So, you never miss an update. Thanks for watching.